So, who am I? Well, I basically kind of just told you who I am, but here are a couple of the titles I've worked on. I previously worked at D3T, which is an outsourcing studio for doing ports and co-development and all sorts of other stuff. Currently work at Wushu. My last title, The Ascent, is due for release soon. But like, it's basically what I've done. What I am is a gameplay programmer, as I've quickly just talked about. So I'm a specialist, quote unquote, but what happens with us programmers, because we're slightly different, we're a peculiar bunch, is that you tend to specialize, but you also are just a generalist. You're always going to be a generalist because you just pick up so much knowledge. So for example, on the Ascent, I did a little bit of gameplay programming, but I actually did about 6 months worth of audio programming, which I've never done before, and it was a really fun experience. So just to give you an idea that there's no, you can specialize if you want to, and you probably should have that in mind at some point. But having general skills is still, sort of valuable even further on in your career. So what I'm going to try and blab about right now to you is, well, I'm going to try and give you some tips and tricks from basically looking for a job to your first, let's say, 3 months of working in the industry. That whenever that may be, because it does take, could be quick, could be long. But hopefully I've got some insights that I've got myself that I didn't have answered at, that I didn't ask the questions of, didn't even know the questions. And that's hopefully what I'm also going to give to you lot. And this is going to be a bit more coding centric. I've tried to generalize it, but I obviously I'm a programmer. I'm very logical, very straightforward thinking in terms of things. I'm not one of the creative types. So to talk about things first, your portfolio is one of the most important things of getting into your first step in the job in the games industry. Like as Kelly has mentioned, quality over quantity by far. Most of the people from my year, me included, we got our jobs based off of 1 or 2 really high quality pieces of work on top of our FMPs and our uni work. The uni work is great, but if you do work outside of uni, it shows to recruiters, it shows to studios that you really are into what you're doing. Like you really have a passion for this stuff. It also allows you to sort of go towards the specialist areas that you're interested in, which you may not know that early on in while you're searching for a job. But it's always nice to keep in mind, like maybe you have an interest in like doing environment art, maybe you have an interest in doing tools programming, maybe you want to mess around with shaders because graphics and mathematics is the best thing since sliced bread. The best way to have your portfolio be shown is your personal websites, of which I highly recommend getting a domain for it. It might seem a bit expensive now, but it goes a long way in terms of seeming very professional in the way that you're presenting yourself, rather than just a Wix site or a Squarespace, whatnot. Your portfolio pieces, normally you host them either on your GitHub or your ArtStation, Bitbucket if you're a hipster, and make sure you always have videos. You don't have to do anything like a narrative walkthrough of what you've done or anything like that, but just a video showcasing like 1-2 minutes of what you've done. Later on, when you've actually worked on some titles and stuff, you can just use trailers. It's just very nice. You can just say, this is the thing I worked on, and it's really beautiful. So the thing that no one really likes to talk about, but we all need to talk about, is recruiters. And there are so many recruiters out there. There are so many of them, and they will do their best to take advantage of you because it's in the best interests of their company to basically recruit them, get the money from the studios. Now, that's fine because that's their job. There's no hard feelings. But what you need to do is make them work for you. So recruiters tend to put you into, from what I've learned, 3 little like buckets of people they definitely want to try and get a job, people that are like the backups if they've done all these, or there's like an edge candidate, and then people that they're going to string you along and just try to appease you and not really try much for you. You need to make sure that, like, no matter where you are, even if you're at the top, you have to be very proactive in your approach with recruiters. When I'm talking about not the ones who work at studios, they're quite different. They're a bit more like, friendly, and they think about what's best for the studio's interests. But I'm talking about things like Aardvark Swift, who are like the biggest recruiter in the UK for video games, and to a lesser extent OPM Jobs and Amicus. They tend to have a lot of graduate and junior roles available. They Aardvark Swift do the grads and games stuff, which I'm sure you've had interactions with, and that's who I got a job through, and I think a couple of others. But you really need to push them as well, still, because I had a friend who essentially got strung along by them because the skills that he had weren't what they were looking for at the current time, but they didn't want to not have him around as a potential client for the future. So what I would do is make sure you get exactly the jobs that they're applying for you from, and keep your own like spreadsheet essentially, or whatever to track that along with what you're applying for, and pester them maybe once, twice a week if there's a lot of applications they said they've sent out for you. But you definitely need to be proactive with these people. Outside of recruitments, if we're talking about you and your own personal job search, if you are finding it, let's say it's been 3 or 4 months, and you're only looking for game jobs, but you haven't managed to have any hits, then you can widen your berth to include things like your normal software jobs, of which there are tons of, and they pay much better than games industry jobs because we do it for the passion. But like, there's no harm in doing that, and the experience, as I said before, is vital. Experience is everything, unfortunately. There are, I think you've probably been linked to the Yuki stuff, which is the Yuki Games map for the UK. It's not fully up to date, but it's a very good start if you don't know a lot about studios in the UK. And there are a load of studios in the UK. Even when I started looking for a job, there were so many that I just didn't know what to do with myself. I thought I knew games, and then you go into the actual world and you're like, right, this is how it is. So I highly recommend, as Tim has said, LinkedIn is a very good place for discovering new stuff. And the Yuki map is a good start. You'll find a lot of outsourcing companies on there. And that's how I myself, and also Shannon, I believe, who graduated in the same year as me, got into the industry. Sumo Digital and Keywords are, Sumo Digital has like 7 studios in the UK, I think, and Keywords has quite a few as well, and they do all sorts of different outsourcing stuff. They recently acquired Climax around the corner in Portsmouth, for example, who are also an outsourcing studio. And also keep an eye on gamesindustry.biz. Not only is it great for like business news, but they have a load of jobs that just get put up on there. Just keep an eye on it every week, see how things go. So you've got the jobs, you've sent them all out, and you get your interviews in. And like, okay, what do we do now? Well, for your interviews, normally what happens is it could be like a 2 or more step process. Normally it's a 2-step. It'll be a test of whatever you're a part of, design, art, code, to show your technical skill. And then you'll normally have the arsehole test, as Kelly has put it, where basically it'll just be a mostly casual interview just to see if you are a human being, and B, that you can actually communicate with others, like I can't, and also just make sure that you're not going to go on a postal spree. I mean, you can overdress for interviews and whatnot. I've shown up to interviews as I am dressed now. It's a very relaxed industry. It's very informal. But that being said, please don't talk yourself out of a job. If you get to the stage where you've got the in chat interview in face, I was going to say in face, but it doesn't happen anymore. Then I've seen some candidates just literally talk themselves out of a job, and it's kind of like, well, it's good that they've shown their colors that early, but like it's really easy to just slip up and, for example, slag off your previous employer, and then that won't be viewed upon favorably at all, because it's character. It's all about your character. But you didn't get the job, so that's fine. It's a very competitive industry, and it is going to be hard to get into. It's not going to be I send off an application, unless you're a savant, and I get the job. That's totally okay. You just try again. You will get in, and you will feel amazed when you do get in. It's very satisfying to get the call back, to know that your dream job, essentially, or the start of your dream career, is happening. But then what? Well, you've got the job. You've done the really hard work, but that's only half the hard work. There's a different flavor of hard work happening, and there's some things that are going to happen now. You're going to make mistakes. It's going to happen, and that's okay. You're also going to have that lovely little creature of imposter syndrome, and that just never goes away, but you learn to live with that, and you will eat a lot. You'll have your comfort food, and you will just, for the start at the very least, you will find that as a nice way to de-stress yourself, or you'll binge on games, or you've got your coping mechanisms. But always remember that when you're hired because you can do the job. You are hired because you have the skills needed, even if it's just problem solving skills, to do exactly what you need to do. Your team that you are now working for are always there to support you. Everybody is there because they want to be, and they want to make games. And there are very few, other than the other creative industries, very few jobs where people come together like that to essentially work together out of pure passion and love of what they're doing. And it will be like you have a second family. You're not going to do a 9 to 5. You are with people like you. Remember that time spent doesn't equal your progress made. So don't worry too much if during your first 3 months, you get a task that takes 3 days and you haven't done anything for a day and a half on that task because it's just you're trying to figure it out. That doesn't mean that you haven't made progress on that task. It's very much that it doesn't just happen. 10% of work doesn't mean 10% of product. And as much as you've learned a lot in the last 3 years, and these guys have prepared you incredibly for all of the challenges that you're going to face. You now have the skills, but these 3 months that you have in your first industry job, you're going to need those skills to learn so much more on the job. There's going to be just so much more, and it will feel overwhelming, but it'll be okay because once again, your team will always be there for you. One thing I wanted to quickly touch on when you start working is you've probably had a little bit of version control and the like, and you've technically got a review process in because you've got your lovely lecturers who look over your work. But the one thing that I wasn't prepared for and the like was that source control and review processes are a huge thing in the games industry. So basically, your work will get looked at by your peers, and they'll check it. They'll go through it. They'll allocate some time. I don't know what the process will be, but they'll have a process set up. And you've got to remember that, like, whatever they say, it's nothing personal. They are just pointing out things that they would either do or other things that potentially you've missed. And that's great because that's a perfect learning opportunity to grow yourself and to take the knowledge of the people around you who you're working with, who, some people have been there 2 years, some people have been there 25 years. It's a huge varied bunch in the games industry. And one useful thing I would do is just have a quick reminder of the version control types out there. Mostly it's going to be Perforce. I've seen a lot of in the industry just because it's good for artists. It's got a nice GUI and it works well with large files, but also Git and SVN, which is Apache Subversion, I think, I can't remember, is used as well quite a bit. So I'm a specialist as well in the gameplay side of things, and I've mentioned I'm also a generalist. Well, on top of that, personally, I think it's very important to keep an eye on essentially what everyone else does in terms of their workday, their average workday, or what they need to do their job. I think that if, for example, you are a tools programmer and you're making a tool for an artist to help them with their own art pipeline, then if you know nothing about the tools that they use or about art, then you're probably going to make a very crappy tool. If you have an interest in that, even if it's not personally like, super art on interest, if it's just I want to learn about this thing because it's interesting, but also it helps it helps my programming, and it also helps the artist that I'm working with. And so I think cross-discipline things aren't a huge thing in the industry. There are a couple of like technical artists, technical designer roles, but normally people try to keep in their own buckets, especially the bigger studios. But I think that personally, for you, it would be better to at least keep up to date on like some bits and pieces of what the others disciplines are doing. One thing I have no idea if you have done, because I'm pretty sure I didn't have a coding standard really when I was doing my uni work. Every studio will have their own standard, and that will be standard of workflow, it will be standard of coding, it will be standard of tools used, all this sort of stuff. And you need to make sure that you just follow that, because there is no one workflow, or sorry, standard that is the answer. And like you'll just create problems and cause issues if you try to force upon your personal preference, because it ultimately is a personal preference. The studio will have chosen whatever their standard is for whatever, and that just follow that, and you'll learn a lot. You'll learn what you want, what you don't want, and it maybe one day when like if you do your own studio or anything, you'll have your own standard, and then you'll encounter somebody exactly like you who will be like, this standard is terrible, why did you choose this standard? But just follow what's there. That's probably the best thing to do. One of the most vital things I think is to work as part of a team, and you're going to be working with these people day in, day out. I haven't experienced crunch myself personally, but if you're crunching and you've got 7 days a week for your deadline that's coming up, then you're going to be living and breathing with these people, and the ability to not irritate others for small things is hugely important. Like there are hills to die on, and then there's just your personal preferences. Once again, you need to be able to separate the two, because not only will it make you happier, but it will also be really good in terms of you working as a team and getting things done, and you'll eventually operate really smoothly. And you could be the next best thing in terms of your discipline of whatever level you're at, but if you can't work in a team, then that's a really big problem, and you have to be like John Carmack levels of good to get away with that. So I'm once again asking you, just don't talk yourself out of your job. I have personally witnessed a junior tell the studio's technical director and a couple of senior programmers that essentially the reasons that they were saying don't do this code was stupid, and they called them stupid. Just don't do that. Please don't do that. Some other little things to keep in mind, that you won't necessarily enjoy every single project that you work on, and I think it's important to try and find the fun in the work you do rather than the job. Personally, I don't like racing games, but I've worked on a Assetto Corsa, and the things that I found in that game really interested me from the code perspective, and that's literally what kept my passion going for that project. Again, you're gonna end up being a generalist for quite some time at the lower levels, and you can push depending on the studio size for specialist roles, but mid to small, generally you're going to be a generalist up until you're sort of 4 years, 5 years in the industry. To some of the people you're with, it's just a job. Like, not everybody, and there might be some of you in this course, but hopefully not if you've taken a course about it, where a job's a job, and it doesn't matter what it is. It just so happens to be somewhat creative. So just remember that everybody has different priorities. Some people don't want to work extra time, not because they don't want to be there, but mostly just because they have a family or something. And so I think having those things in mind, of just being mindful of your coworkers and whatnot, and that everyone is different, it's very important. And lastly, the reason I really wanted to try and find a reason to use this GIF, I love this GIF, but you're always going to be fighting for more time. The producer is always going to be holding your time hostage, and you've got to really try and fight for the extra hours that you can spend on a task. Sometimes you can't. Sometimes it's just the deadline's a deadline, but other times, if you can get an extra 4 hours on a task, and even if you don't need those 4 hours, that's better than underestimating by 4 hours, and now you're in a bad situation where you're behind quite a bit. So ultimately, just relax. Just don't worry about anything. Like everything I've talked about, there's a lot going on, but you don't need to stress about it. You don't need to worry about it. Remember, I forgot it was called the Pareto principle, but basically the 80-20 rule, which in computing is it takes 80% of the time to do 20% of the work, and it will take 20% of the time to do 80% of the work. That's something to keep in mind. Personally, I really like rapid prototyping and extreme programming stuff because it lets me get out that 80% of work really quickly, so I can see from a gameplay perspective, what I'm doing. Does it tick all of the boxes? Does it let me do exactly what the designer wants? Does it have any problems? And now that I've done it, is this fit to continue working on? And so Ken Beck, who is the founder of Extreme Programming and also one of the signatories of the Agile programming methodology, project methodology, I can't remember exactly. This quote, I always live by this quote, even in my work today. It's make it work, make it right, make it fast. So just get your idea out first, make sure that it works exactly how you want it to, then do it properly, then make it fast. For programming specifically, that is kind of, but also artists, you artists got to optimize your art as well, unless you're using Unreal Engine 5. I have my own personal recommended reading list. I think, as I am more into the cross-disciplinary stuff myself, and I work closely with design, I like having an interest in all sorts of stuff. If there is one thing that you do from this list, it wouldn't even be the GDC talks, because GDC is a great repository of information. They have all of their talks up on YouTube that they release every now and then, unless you have access to their GDC vault, which is all of them, but the YouTube has plenty of content. I would recommend Double Fine Adventure, because Double Fine Adventure is the, if you've played Broken Age or you know about Broken Age, it's Double Fine's documentary about the literal start from inception to finish about that game. And I think there's like 15 to 20 hours worth of content, I think, of literally just how a game is made. And I think that it's so insightful, and watching that made me really understand that games was where I wanted to be, and gave me a lot of expectations about it, and I was luckily not as shocked because I had seen that. There's also the design books from the old designers from the 80s and 90s, I think are very insightful if you want the idea of how design worked back then, because it's very different compared to now. But Double Fine Adventure is the pretty big one there. But all in all, that's pretty much my ramblings. I hope that it's been somewhat insightful, maybe. But,
Thank you, Alex. That's fantastic. Thank you very much.